Hi, thank you for your question regarding printing onto the BG7. As you're probably aware, the TPU is a very heat-sensitive material, so you do need to be quite careful when you are doing any kind of heat transfer pressing onto it. Issues with melting the bag, or especially the edge of the transfer leaving an imprint, but hopefully I can give you a couple of tips and tricks, show you the best way when it comes to decorating this kind of bag. So there's two main ways I'm going to show you how we can press onto this type of bag. The first is we're going to use a cap heat press. This specific one is from Hotronics, and the reason we're going to use this is because it heats from both sides. So the bottom plate heats up as well as the top plate, which means you're not putting as much heat on one side. The heat's a little bit more distributed. So we're just going to hook the bag firstly onto the bottom heat press plate. We don't want to stretch the bag too much as we're putting it on, just because under the heat it will kind of distort if it's stretched out. So we want it to just kind of lie as flat as possible without putting too much strain on the material. We have our DTF transfer here. This also works for flex, vinyl, all works absolutely fine. So the current settings on this heat press, it's 110 degrees Celsius on the top plate, and the bottom plate is 130. So once we're happy with our position, I'm going to grab a sheet of parchment paper. Now you want to use parchment paper in particular as opposed to Teflon, because Teflon does have a slight texture to it. If you look closely, the kind of weave of the material has a slight texture to it, and underneath the heat press this is just going to kind of stamp into the material and leave it with the texture that is on the Teflon. Whereas parchment paper is nice and smooth, so you're not going to get that problem. Next we're going to grab a sheet of polyester felt. Now this is just like craft felt, anything you can kind of pick up from like kids stores or art shops. And this is going to really stop the edge of the transfer leaving an imprint in the material. Again, it's just taking the right precautions to really minimize the risks of marking and damaging the material. Then using a light pressure, I'm just going to press the area for about 10 to 12 seconds, so quite a short press. But because you've got heat on both sides, you don't really require too long a press. Now after the time is up, I can remove it from the heat press. And it's going to be very warm and very soft, so I want to be very careful as I remove it. And I'm just going to cool the area down very quickly. But you can see already the material hasn't melted. Once it's cool, I'm just going to peel away transfer backing paper. And if there are any marks, and to really kind of solidify the print onto the bag, I'm just going to pop it back on without the backing paper. Once again, I'm going to cover with the parchment paper and felt, and I'm just going to do another quick 10 to 12 second press. Now this will really secure the transfer onto the bag, as well as lifting any little marks that might have been left from the edge of the transfer. Once that's done, I can take it off and you can see we have a nice print without any marks or damage. The second way I'm going to show you today is by using a normal flatbed heat press. So I have everything I need ready to go here. I have my DTF transfer, I have my sheet of felt, and I have 2 sheets of parchment paper. Now the first thing we're going to do is separate the sides of the bag by popping in a sheet of parchment paper. If you have a heat press where you can switch to a smaller plate, one that you can sleeve onto the machine, that'll work a lot better. But for this heat press, we're just going to separate the sides, and I'm just going to do it on the corner of the heat press. And I'm going to pop down my DTF transfer. And position it just on the edge, on the corner of the heat press. So as little of the bag is on the heat press as possible. Again, I'm going to place over my parchment paper as well as my sheet of felt. And because the heat is coming from one side rather than 2, with this flatbed heat press, I'm going to press it for a little bit longer and a little bit hotter. So we're going to do it at 130 degrees for about 30 seconds. So the felt will protect the bag from the higher temperature, while also allowing the transfer to stick properly. Once the 30 seconds is up, I can open the heat press. And again, I'm going to let the area cool as much as I can before I remove the release paper on the transfer. So once that's cool, I can peel it away. And again, we're just going to press it again for the same amount of time, the same temperature and the same pressure. We're not going to change anything. Just pop over the parchment paper and the felt and press again for the whole 30 seconds. Great, so once that's done, I can open up the heat press and I can remove the parchment paper from inside, and there we have a DTF transfer with no marking, no damage on the bag, really nicely printed. So the two ways to print onto this bag, both using different heat presses, slightly different times and temperatures, but the same kind of process. As long as you're using the parchment paper and the felt, you won't get any kind of damage or melting of the bag.